Welcome, dear dreamer, to another night with whispers of the night. Tonight, I invite you to let go of the weight you carry, to set aside the noise of the day, and to rest in the quiet embrace of story and stillness. The tale we will journey into is woven with shadows, old trees, and forgotten whispers, a fairy tale born of roots and mystery, called The Spirit Beneath the Ash Tree. Here, in the soft glow of candlelight and the comfort of your bed, you can allow the world outside to drift away. All that matters now is the steady rhythm of your breath, the warmth of your blanket, and the sound of words guiding you gently toward sleep. Let the story be a lantern to your imagination, flickering softly in the night. As you listen, there is no need to hold on to anything. Each thought, each tension can loosen and fade, like mist unraveling at dawn. This is your time to rest, to dream, and to wander through the hush of an ancient tale. And so, when you are ready, close your eyes, let your body grow heavy, and step quietly with me into the shadow of the ash tree. Before we begin our tale, let us first prepare the body and mind for rest. Take a slow, deep breath in and gently exhale. Feel the rhythm of your breathing, steady and calm, like the sway of branches in a quiet forest as you breathe. Imagine yourself lying beneath the stars, a blanket of night stretched endlessly above. Around you, the forest is alive with stillness, the hush of leaves, the gentle sigh of wind moving softly through the ash tree's crown. With each breath, you feel lighter, as though the earth itself is holding you in its steady embrace. Notice the way your shoulders sink deeper into comfort, the way your arms grow heavy and warm, the muscles in your face soften, your jaw loosens, and your eyes rest easily behind closed lids. With every exhale, you let go a little more, as though releasing leaves into a flowing stream. Now picture the ancient ash tree. Its roots travel deep into the soil, grounding you, steadying you. With each inhale, imagine drawing strength from those roots, calm, enduring, unshaken. And with each exhale, imagine sending away any worries, letting them dissolve into the quiet earth below. You are safe here, protected by the night, surrounded by the quiet glow of lantern light and stars. The world beyond cannot reach you, not here, not now. All that exists is the softness of your breath, the rhythm of your heart, and the stillness of this sacred place. Feel yourself drifting closer to sleep's edge, like a leaf carried gently on the wind. There is no effort, no resistance, only the ease of surrender, the gentle pull of dreams. Stay in this quiet for a moment longer, resting in the shelter of the ash tree. When you are ready, we will step softly into the story, where whispers stir beneath the roots, and a young girl named Ilara dares to listen. The spirit beneath the ash tree, the village of ashen roots. At the edge of a forgotten valley, where mist lingered even on bright days, and the wind seemed to carry whispers from long ago, stood the ash tree. It was no ordinary tree, for it towered above every cottage, barn, and hill, its bark gray as weathered bone, and its crown stretching wide as though trying to embrace the sky itself. The villagers called it the Old One, though some, under their breath, gave it darker names: the Hollow, Guardian, the Root that Drinks, the Shadekeeper. Its branches were crooked, twisting like skeletal fingers, and when storms rattled across the valley, the ash tree groaned, as though it were alive with more than just wood and sap. Beneath it, the ground bulged and cracked, roots like great blackened veins clawing at the earth. Children were told never to touch them, never to step upon them, for they were not roots but chains, chains that bound a spirit beneath the tree. The tale was older than the village itself, passed down in murmurs from one gray-haired storyteller to the next. Long ago, before roofs of thatch dotted the valley and smoke curled from chimneys, there had been a great sorrow here. A wanderer, cloaked in ash and shadow, had been condemned for deeds no one could clearly recall. Some claimed he had stolen voices from the living. Others whispered he had lured travelers into darkness and feasted upon their grief. Whatever his crime, it had been grave enough for the elders of an age long past to bind him beneath the earth, sealing him with roots of ash wood, a tree planted not for life but for prison. And so the spirit slept, or pretended to. The villagers lived in uneasy silence with this silent warden of their land. They never cut its branches for firewood, though winters were cruel and frost bit through walls. They never carved their initials into its bark, though young lovers often passed by with temptation in their hearts. Instead, they brought offerings. At each new moon, the village gathered quietly in the dim blue of twilight. At the tree's base, they laid bread still warm from the oven, bowls of milk smooth as moonlight, and sometimes honey when the bees were kind. It was not worship, or so they told themselves. It was remembrance, it was respect, it was fear wrapped in ritual. Yet no matter how often the offerings were made, the villagers knew unease. The shadows beneath the tree seemed thicker than shadows elsewhere, clinging like cobwebs even in sunlight. Travelers who rested beneath its branches often woke pale and trembling, muttering of dreams where something cold brushed their cheeks, whispering their names in voices not their own. Some swore they heard weeping beneath the roots, faint but unrelenting, like water dripping deep in caverns. Children, curious as children always are, tested the warnings. One boy placed his hand upon the bark and came away with fingers blistered as though burned. A girl dared to sleep upon the roots and woke without a voice for 3 days, her cries nothing but hollow air. After that, the elders told the stories with sharper tones, and mothers struck fear into their young with threats of the root spirit will come for you if you stray. Still, life in the village went on. It was a small place, a cluster of timber, cottages with roofs sloping under the weight of moss, stone paths curling like veins through fields of barley and flax. The people were quiet folk, tending their animals, mending their nets, drawing water from the well in silence. They were not unkind, but theirs was not a place for laughter. The shadow of the ash tree hung heavy, and even in times of harvest or weddings, joy seemed muted, like a bell wrapped in cloth. Strangers rarely visited. Those who stumbled into the valley often left quickly, muttering of the strange stillness of nights where even the crickets hushed their song. The villagers would give them food for their journey, point them towards safer roads, and never ask for their return. Better fewer eyes to witness what they lived with each day. Yet in every household there lingered a quiet dread, a thought unspoken. What if the offerings were not enough? On certain nights, when the sky was heavy with storm clouds and thunder rolled against the mountains, the villagers swore they felt a shiver through the ground, as though something vast shifted below the soil. Dogs whimpered and refused to leave their hearths. Infants cried without ceasing. Elders closed their eyes and muttered old prayers not found in any book. And always the tree loomed. Some claimed to see shapes moving in its branches, not birds, not leaves, but shadows with human outlines. A woman fetching water late at dusk once said she saw a pale hand slip from between the roots and then vanish when she screamed. A hunter, drunk on mead, boasted that he would cut the tree down and free whatever lay beneath. But come morning, he was gone, his footprints ending at the base of the ash, where only his knife remained. Of course, none of these tales were spoken too loudly. To give the spirit name, to give it weight, was to invite its gaze. The elders had their sayings, half warnings, half proverbs. The tree is older than the village. The village will wither before the tree does. Bread keeps hunger at bay, even for what lies beneath. Do not listen when the wind carries voices. It is not the wind that speaks. Still, beneath all words, one truth remained. The spirit stirred. Not every villager admitted it, but all felt it. In dreams, in moments between waking and sleep, the young dreamed of being called into the forest by a voice they knew yet did not. The old dreamed of roots wrapping around their bones, pulling them slowly into earth. And though mornings brought sunlight and birdsongs, the unease never left. One autumn, when the valley was painted in gold and the air smelled of smoke from hearth fires, the offerings began to disappear more quickly. Where once bread went stale and milk soured by dawn, now the bowls were empty before the night ended, their surfaces licked clean, though no animal tracks marked the soil. A hush spread through the village, but no one dared speak the truth. The spirit's hunger was growing. Mothers clutched their children tighter, refusing to let them stray, even to fetch water. Fathers sharpened their axes, though none would raise them against the tree. The elders met in silence, their faces gray, their lips pressed tight. Something had shifted, and they all knew it. At night, the wind carried voices clearer than before. Not whispers now, but songs, low, mournful songs, that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. And within those songs, if one listened too closely, one might hear a name, sometimes their own, sometimes the names of the dead, sometimes names not yet spoken in the village, but waiting, as though chosen in advance. Still, the rituals continued. Still, the offerings were placed, but beneath the roots, the spirit waited, patient as stone, hungry as fire. The crumbs and milk no longer sated its appetite. Soon it would crave more, and when it did, the village would learn that chains made of wood and time cannot bind what feeds on sorrow forever. The girl who heard the whisper. In the village, where shadows clung as stubbornly as ivy, there lived a girl named Ilara. She was not like the others, where most villagers bowed their heads and hurried past the ash tree with downcast eyes. Ilara lingered. She lingered because she did not believe. Ghost stories, to her, were the inventions of fearful minds. She listened to the tales of the elders with a crooked smile and a restless tapping of her fingers. Spirits chained beneath roots, voices in the wind. To Ilara, it was nothing but fancy stories meant to keep children obedient and villagers tethered to tradition. Her life in the valley felt unbearably small. Days were filled with the same motions, carrying water from the well, feeding chickens that scattered at her feet, gathering herbs at the edge of the woods. At night, she lay in her straw bed, listening to her parents' soft murmurs, wishing for more than barley fields, more than thatched roofs, more than a life that seemed already decided for her. Ilara longed for mystery, for adventure, for a story worth telling. And in her heart, though she would never admit it aloud, she longed for power. It was perhaps this hunger that drew her to the tree, while others gave it offerings with trembling hands. Ilara found herself studying its bark, its strange, twisted limbs, the gnarled roots that seemed to pulse when the wind shifted. Sometimes, when she walked home late from the fields, she would pause just within its shadow and wait, daring the spirit to show itself. Nothing happened, of course, and she would laugh to herself, light and sharp as breaking glass, and run home. But one evening, when the sky burned with the embers of sunset, and the fields glowed with that fleeting hour where day leans into night, Ilara stayed longer than usual. The air was hushed, as though the whole valley held its breath. She leaned against the tree's vast trunk, her palms pressed to the ridges of bark. She closed her eyes, listening to the sighing of leaves overhead. That was when she heard it. Her name, Ilara. It was so faint at first, she thought it was the wind. She opened her eyes, startled, but the fields around her lay empty, and the village lights were still distant. She swallowed, heart fluttering, and pressed her ear closer to the bark. Ilara, this time, the voice was clearer, rising not from the branches but from deep within the earth, a whisper curling up through the roots, soft as a secret, intimate as breath against her skin. She stumbled back, terror flashing through her, but beneath the fear there was something else, a thrill. It was low and melodic, like a forgotten lullaby. And in it was something she had never heard in her parents' voices, never felt in the elders' warnings. There was a tension, a strange, aching warmth that told her she was being noticed, chosen. That night, she told no one. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding with the memory of it. And though she told herself it was nothing but imagination, she longed to hear it again. So she returned the next night, when the sun had dipped and twilight stretched thin and blue. Ilara crept once more to the ash tree. She leaned against its trunk, almost afraid of silence. But it came again, smoother this time, flowing like water through the cracks of the roots. Ilara, you hear me? Her breath caught. Yes, she whispered before she could stop herself. A soft chuckle rippled through the bark, a sound that seemed to stroke her bones. I have waited for one who listens. Ilara's skin prickled. What are you? A friend? The voice murmured. A voice in the hollow, a keeper of secrets. You are not like the others. You are curious, restless, aching for more. I can give you what you seek. The promise was intoxicating. Power, knowledge, freedom from this tiny village that smothered her like a shroud, yet fear still gripped her. She pulled away, running home with the echo of its words filling her ears. But once a door is opened, it cannot be closed. Ilara returned again and again, each night with trembling steps that became more certain. The spirit spoke in fragments at first, broken words seeping up through the roots, power beyond them all, knowledge of forgotten things escape from chains. She leaned closer each time, straining to hear, her lips brushing the bark as though speaking into a lover's ear. And slowly, without realizing, she began to answer. What knowledge? She would ask. What escape? What power can you give me? And the spirit laughed softly, a laugh like dry leaves stirred by the wind. Each word she heard was a thread, invisible yet strong. And with each visit, those threads bound her tighter, weaving her into the spirit's tapestry. The villagers noticed her strangeness. Mothers whispered that Ilara walked too often by the tree. Children kept their distance, sensing something in her gaze, something distant, as though she were listening to voices no one else could hear. Her own parents tried to forbid her from wandering at twilight, but Ilara grew cunning. She slipped away with the quiet of a fox, drawn irresistibly back to the whisper. Nights deepened, and so did the voice. It no longer spoke, only her name. It told her things she could not have known. It described the hidden well under the oldest house, where water ran even in drought. It spoke of a lost locket buried near the chapel stones, which she later dug up with trembling hands. It told her of the storm coming before the sky showed a single cloud. And when each secret proved true, Ilara's disbelief cracked. The stories she had once mocked no longer seemed like nonsense. The spirit was real, and it had chosen her. The knowledge it offered was small at first, but Ilara craved more. Each revelation was a taste, and she hungered now as keenly as the spirit itself. She began to dream of it, dreams where roots twined around her wrists, not as shackles, but as bracelets, where a voice murmured promises against her ear, until she woke, trembling with longing. By day, she grew restless, irritable, impatient with the dull routines of village life. She snapped at her mother, ignored her father, and scoffed at the elders' tales with sharper cruelty. But by night, she softened, pressing her ear to the roots, whispering questions, pleading for more. And the spirit gave it told her she was meant for greatness, that the village was too small for her, that she was not meant to live and die unseen among fields of barley. You are meant to command, it crooned, to hold secrets no other mortal dares, to rise above them all. Ilara's heart raced with every word. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. What she did not know, what she could not know, was that with each promise, each secret, she fed the spirit. It was no longer satisfied with bread and milk. Her curiosity, her yearning, her restless hunger, these were sweeter offerings, and it drank them deeply. By the time Ilara realized she could no longer pass the tree without stopping, it was too late. The spirit's threads had already bound her, unseen but unbreakable, weaving her fate into its design. And in the hollow beneath the ash tree, the spirit smiled, for after countless seasons of waiting, it had found its voice in the world above. A girl bold enough to listen and foolish enough to believe. The spirits bargained. The storm that night was unlike any Ilara had seen. The sky cracked open with lightning, jagged spears of white tearing through the clouds, and the valley shook beneath thunder that rolled like drums of war. Rain came in sheets, hammering rooftops and flooding fields. But Ilara did not stay inside, as the others did. Something pulled her, relentless as a tide, toward the ash tree. She wrapped her cloak around her shoulders and ran through the mud, her hair plastered against her face, her feet splashing in icy puddles. She should have been afraid of the storm, but fear had become unfamiliar to her now. What she felt instead was anticipation, an ache that had grown sharper with every whisper she had heard. The ash tree loomed ahead, blacker than the night itself, its branches thrashing like arms in agony. Lightning struck nearby, casting it in a stark white glow, and for an instant she thought she saw a shape moving within the bark, a shadow with eyes. Her heart leaped, but she did not turn away. Breathless, Ilara pressed her hand against the trunk. The bark was slick and cold as stone. Aroth, she whispered, though she had never been told the name. It had come to her in a dream, curling on her tongue like smoke. The ground shuddered, roots shifted beneath her feet, groaning like the creak of ancient timbers. Slowly, impossibly, they began to part. Mud slid away, soil cracked open, and the great veins of the tree twisted like serpents, drawing back as if opening the bars of a cage. From within the hollow below came a darkness deeper than shadow, a darkness that seemed to drink the storm's light. And then he rose. The spirit was not man, nor beast, but something caught between his form, shifted as she tried to look at him. Tall as a man one moment, hunched and monstrous the next, always cloaked in ash and smoke. His face was obscured, but from within the shroud burned to faint embers, eyes glowing red with a weary fire. Ilara, his voice rolled up from the depths like thunder, yet it was still soft, intimate, as if he spoke only to her. You have heard me. You have come. Ilara trembled, water dripping from her cloak, yet she did not flee. Her hand remained upon the bark, though her skin tingled as though the tree burned her. What are you?" The shadow straightened, rain hissing against his form but never wetting him. "I am Eroth, once flesh, once breath, once heart. Long ago, I was like you, a soul that hungered for more. But he lifted an arm, pointing toward the distant lights of the village. "They bound me here, betrayed me, sacrificed me to their fear. They planted this tree above my grave, and its roots grew into chains. For centuries, I have been their prisoner." Elara's lips parted. She thought of the elders' tales, a cursed spirit, dangerous and vile. But Eroth's voice was not that of a monster. It dripped with sorrow, with rage sharpened into venom, yet it also carried a strange tenderness when it spoke her name. Why did they bind you?" she asked, though the answer already coiled in her chest. "They feared me," Eroth murmured. "I had knowledge they did not understand. I could call the winds, see the secrets that lay buried, hear the cries of the unborn stars. They feared what they could not control. So they betrayed me, chained me beneath the roots, and fed me scraps to keep me silent. Bread, milk, whispers. I was not meant to rot here, Elara. I was meant to rule the winds themselves." Lightning illuminated his face, or what remained of it, the faint curve of cheekbones, the hollow of eyes burning faintly. Elara's breath caught. He looked both terrible and beautiful, a vision that filled her with dread and desire, all at once. "You are not like them," Eroth continued, his voice lowering to a velvet growl. "You listen, you seek, you ache for more. You do not belong to their small lives and smaller fears. You belong to me." His words wound around her heart like roots. A part of her screamed to run, but another part, stronger, hungrier, whispered that this was what she had always longed for, proof that the world held more than barley and silence. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Eroth's eyes glowed brighter, twin embers flaring in the storm. "Freedom. I cannot break these chains alone. But you, Elara, you can, you must. Help me, and I will help you. I will lift you from this gray life, and give you power enough to shape your own destiny. You will never kneel, never wither in the shadows of others. You will write your own story in fire and ash." Elara's pulse thundered. The words struck the deepest chords of her longing. She imagined herself not as a girl fetching water, but as a woman cloaked in power, commanding storms, silencing the mockery of elders with a glance. She imagined leaving the valley forever, her name whispered with awe instead of pity. "How?" she asked. The spirit's smile flickered like a crack in the night. "There are 3 tasks, simple things, yet bound with weight. Complete them, and the chains will weaken. With each, I will reward you. Knowledge, strength, freedom. At the end, you will stand beside me, no longer caged in this valley." Thunder rolled, as if the heavens themselves shuddered at his promise. Elara hesitated. She could feel her heart urging caution, whispering of danger. But she remembered the nights of endless monotony, the years stretching before her like a path already walked. Wasn't this what she wanted? A chance to escape, to live more than a quiet, wasted life. "What are the tasks?" she asked at last. Aroth leaned closer, his voice a hiss that slid beneath her skin. "The first is small, a seed, to test your resolve. Bring me a token of the village's trust, something they treasure, something they believe safe. Place it here at the roots, and I will show you what lies beyond the veil of sight. Ilara's throat tightened, a token of trust that would mean stealing, betraying her own people. She stepped back, shaking her head. I can't. You can, Eroth said. And now his voice was not soft, but commanding, the storm itself speaking through him. And you will. For if you do not, you will remain as you are, a ghost in your own life, forgotten before you are gone. His ember eyes flared. You are more than they allow you to be. Do not crawl when you were meant to soar. Rain streamed down her face, but it was not water that made her eyes glisten. It was the weight of the choice pressing upon her, slowly. Ilara nodded. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible beneath the storm. I'll do it. The roots trembled, the ground shuddered, and a deep, satisfied sigh rose from the hollow. Aroth's form shifted, smoke curling upward like a crown. Good, he murmured. With this bargain, our fates entwine. 3 tasks, 3 chains broken. At the end, you will stand free, and so will I. The storm raged on, lightning burning the valley white. But Ilara felt only the glow of his promise searing inside her. She did not know then that each task would not only loosen his chains, but weave her ever deeper into his grasp. The 3 tasks. The night after the bargain, Ilara could not sleep. Rain still drummed faintly on the roof, though the storm had passed. And in the silence between drops, she heard his voice, not in words this time, but in memory, curling through her thoughts like smoke. 3 tasks, 3 chains broken. Her hands trembled as she clutched her blanket. She had agreed. She had said the words, and now the weight of them pressed heavy against her chest. The first task came quickly. Aroth whispered it to her the next evening, his ember eyes flaring brighter than before. Bring me the lantern, the lantern. Every villager knew it. Each winter, when the nights grew longest and frost painted the valley in silver, the sacred lantern was lit at the village's heart. It burned with a strange, steady glow passed down from generations, said to keep wandering spirits at bay. Even the bravest children hushed their voices when they passed it. To steal it was not only to betray the village, it was to unravel their faith. But Ilara could not stop herself. The thought of disappointing Eroth filled her with a sharper dread than the thought of disobeying her people. So she waited until the moon was high. Cloaked in shadows, she crept through the quiet lanes. Her feet knew every stone, every bend. Yet her heartbeat thundered as though she were a stranger in her own village. The lantern stood in its place near the well, burning softly, its golden light pushing against the darkness. Ilara paused, breath caught in her throat. It was beautiful, not just a lantern, but a promise, warm and steady, a comfort that had belonged to her people for centuries. She almost turned back, but then Aroth's voice stirred in her ear, low and insistent. Do not falter, take it, and you will be more than a servant to their fear. Her hands shook as she reached for it. The metal was cool beneath her fingers, the glass warm with flame. She pulled her cloak around it to hide its glow, and in the sudden darkness of the square, the village felt colder, emptier. She hurried back, her footsteps echoing louder than they ever had, until she reached the ash tree dot at its roots. She set the lantern down. Its light flickered strangely, as though dimming in the shadow of the spirit. Aroth's laughter rippled up from the hollow, soft and triumphant. "Well done," he whispered. One chain loosens. Alara's chest ached with guilt, but the ember glow of his eyes drew her in. She told herself it was worth it. One task done, one step closer to freedom. The second task came days later, darker still. The village feeds itself with grain and salt, Aroth said. Take what they hoard and scatter it into the river. Let them taste despair. Alara's breath caught. This was no theft of light. This was sabotage. Hunger would follow. Sickness, perhaps. But Aroth's voice slid through her doubt like a knife. They betrayed me to save their harvests. Let them know what it is to hunger. Do this, and I will show you sights beyond the veil of mortal eyes. That promise burned in her like a brand. So, one night, she crept to the granaries. The doors creaked, the smell of grain thick in the air. She filled her apron with salt, handful after handful, her arms straining beneath the weight. She carried it to the river's edge, the moonlight silver on the black water. Her hands hovered over the current. This time, guilt nearly strangled her. She could hear the laughter of children in her mind, their bellies already thin after the harsh winter passed. She could see her mother's tired face, her father's calloused hands. But Aroth whispered again, a caress in her thoughts. You are not like them. You are destined for more. This is but a small sacrifice. Her fingers opened. The salt hissed as it struck the water, vanishing into darkness. Again and again she poured, until the last grains slid from her hands. The river carried it away, silent and unfeeling. The next day, the water tasted bitter. By evening, the villagers whispered of bad luck, of curses, of spirits displeased. Hunger gnawed at their faces as the food spoiled more quickly than before. And at the ash tree, Aroth's eyes gleamed. 2 chains broken, he murmured. You are closer now. You can feel it, can you not? Power waiting, just beyond your reach. Alara nodded, though her stomach twisted. She could feel something, yes, but whether it was power or guilt, she could not say. The third task came like a blade to the heart, blood. Aroth whispered, his voice now thicker, stronger, as though the chains themselves had weakened. Not from beast, not from cattle. Blood of the old one, the woman who binds their stories. End her voice, and I shall end your chains. Alara's breath caught in her throat. The storyteller, yes, Aroth hissed. Her words keep their fear alive. She binds me still with every tale she tells. Silence her, and I will be free. And you will rise beside me. Alara could barely breathe. The storyteller, the old woman with silver hair who sat by the fire each winter, her voice weaving tales of courage and sorrow. Alara had grown up listening to her words, spellbound, her imagination alight. It was the storyteller who had taught her that the world was larger than their valley. that there were kingdoms beyond the mountains, seas wider than thought to harm her was unthinkable. And yet, that night, Alara found herself at the woman's door, a knife clutched in her trembling hand. The cottage glowed faintly with lamplight. Through the window, Alara saw the old woman seated at her table, hands busy with mending, eyes soft with patience. She knocked once, softly, and the woman lifted her gaze. "Alara," she said warmly when the door opened. "Child, you're soaked through. Come in, come in." Her kindness was like sunlight breaking through cloud. Ilara's fingers tightened on the knife, but her arm felt suddenly heavy, unbearably heavy. She stepped inside. The cottage smelled of herbs and smoke, of bread. Still warm, the woman guided her to the hearth, pressed a blanket around her shoulders. "You look troubled, my dear. Tell me what weighs on you." The words broke something inside Alara. For days she had been drowning in secrets, her heart pulled between fear and desire. Now, here, in the gentleness of the storyteller's gaze, the haze around her lifted. She saw Aroth's lies for what they were. He had not been betrayed. He was no victim. He was a predator, feeding on her weakness, twisting her hunger for more into chains, tighter than the roots themselves. Tears burned her eyes. The knife slipped from her fingers, clattering against the floor. "Alara," the woman said softly, her hand resting on the girl's trembling arm. "Do not listen to the shadows. You are stronger than you know." In that moment, Alara knew the truth. She could not finish the third task. To spill the woman's blood would not free her. It would bind her forever to the darkness beneath the tree. She fled, cloak flying behind her, her feet carrying her back to the ash tree. The roots seemed to writhe as she approached, Aroth's form already stirring within the hollow. "Alara," he called, his voice sharp now, impatient. "Where is the blood? Where is my freedom?" But Alara no longer trembled with awe. She trembled with rage, with fear, with clarity. She had been deceived, and now she was determined to end what she had begun, even if it meant facing the spirit's fury. The battle beneath the roots. The night of reckoning had come. Alara's footsteps pressed into the wet soil as she approached the ash tree, each step heavier than the last. The wind had changed, colder and sharper than the evenings before, carrying with it a mournful howl that echoed like a dirge through the village fields. The ash tree itself seemed restless. Its branches writhed like serpents against the storm, groaning and creaking as though some great force pushed and pulled within its heartwood. The villagers slept behind shuttered windows, unaware of the war about to be waged in the darkness beyond their homes. Alara clutched the sacred lantern to her chest. Its flame was small, wavering in the wild gusts, but it burned with an ancient steadiness that warmed her trembling hands. She could feel it, humming faintly, as though it were alive, its pulse syncing with her own heartbeat. The stories whispered by the old storyteller returned to her mind. The lantern had been lit with a flame older than curses, born from a fire kindled to protect the village from the creeping dark that once devoured lands. She prayed silently that the tales were true, for it was all she had left. As she drew nearer, the ground beneath the ash tree began to stir. Roots twisted and heaved like living things, tearing themselves from the soil, cracking the earth wide open. A voice rose from below, a Roth's voice, no longer soft and silken, but booming like thunder rolling through a cavern. "You dare betray me, child," he thundered, his tone a blend of fury and anguish. "You carried out my will, loosened my chains, and now you think to deny me freedom. You are mine, Elara. Your soul is the final thread, and with it I will walk the earth once more." Elara's knees shook, but she forced herself forward, lantern in hand. "No," she whispered, though the wind threatened to swallow her words. "You will not have me. You will not have them." The earth split wider, and from the hollow surged Eroth. He was no longer the shadowy, ember-eyed figure she had first seen. Now his form was monstrous, vast as a storm cloud, woven from smoke, ash, and fragments of bone. His eyes glowed like molten coals, and from his back unfurled wings of darkness that blotted out the stars. He had fed upon the tasks she had done, each act of betrayal strengthening him, making him solid, real. Now he towered above her, a god of ruin clawing his way into the world. Elara nearly faltered. The sight of him was enough to break even the strongest spirit. Yet the lantern in her hands pulsed brighter, as if answering her fear with defiance. She held it higher, and the flame leaped, sending out a circle of golden light. Eroth hissed and recoiled, his form shuddering as the radiance licked at his edges. "That flame," he snarled, voice cracking the air. "It is no weapon against me. It is but a trinket, a candle in a storm. I will snuff it out, and then you." But Elara stood her ground. "This flame was lit to guard against you long before I was born. It remembers what you are. It knows your name." With a scream of rage, Eroth surged forward. His shadow poured like smoke around her, claws of ash reaching to rip the lantern from her hands. The ground trembled under his wrath, roots whipping through the air like lashes, stones shattering as they were uprooted. Yet the lantern's glow pushed against him, burning away tendrils of his form each time they touched the light. Where the radiance struck, the shadow hissed and dissolved like frost meeting fire. Elara's heart pounded, terror clawing at her chest. But she remembered. The storyteller's eyes, gentle, unwavering, filled with faith. That memory steadied her. She stepped closer to the hollow at the tree's roots, holding the lantern before her like a shield. The tree groaned louder, its bark splitting and blackening, sap boiling like blood. Eroth shrieked, his voice a symphony of rage and desperation. He lunged again, this time with his full strength, wings unfurling, his massive form blotting out the moon. The world seemed to collapse into shadow. "Child of dust," he roared, "do you not see I was wronged? They bound me here, fed their harvests with my agony, and made me their scapegoat. Free me, and I will give you everything you crave. Defy me, and you will be nothing ashes beneath my wings." The words struck deep. For a heartbeat, Elara felt the weight of her loneliness. her yearning for more than the dull confines of the village. She had wanted escape, freedom, knowledge. Was she truly strong enough to resist him? She faltered, flame wavering. Eroth smiled, his ember eyes glowing with triumph. Yes, give in, Alara. You and I are not so different. Together we can remake the world. But then she remembered the hunger that had followed her second task, the hollow eyes of children as the village's food spoiled. She remembered the old storyteller's trembling hands and how kindness, not power, had saved her from falling into darkness. She remembered her own shame, her guilt for the harm she had brought, and with those memories came clarity. Eroth was not a victim. He was a predator, feeding on hope, twisting truth into chains. No, she said, her voice steady this time. You will not have me. You will not have them. And with that, Alara plunged the lantern into the hollow at the roots. The flame exploded outward, not with fire, but with light, brilliant, golden, pure. It raced through the veins of the ash tree, spreading like lightning across its trunk and branches. Every fissure in the bark blazed. Every root glowed as though molten. The light pierced the ground, the sky, even the storm clouds above, until the world was drenched in radiance. Eroth screamed, a sound so terrible it seemed to tear the air apart. His vast wings crumbled into smoke, his claws dissolved into dust. He writhed and clawed at the earth, but the roots surged upward, wrapping around him like iron chains. His form unraveled, shadow sloughing away piece by piece as the light bound him tighter, dragging him back into the hollow from which he had emerged. You cannot bind me forever, he howled, his voice breaking. I will return. Darkness does not die, it waits. But the lantern's light burned brighter, silencing him. With one final shriek, Eroth's form collapsed inward, sucked into the prison of roots and soil. The earth sealed over him, the ash tree's blackened bark hardening like stone. The branches, once writhing, fell still. The storm began to ease, rain softening into drizzle, the wind falling quiet. Alara collapsed to her knees, the lantern dim now, its task complete. Her body shook with exhaustion, and tears streamed down her cheeks. She had faced a monster and nearly lost herself, but she had chosen not power, not escape, but protection. The village would never know what battle had been fought in the fields that night, but they would live, safe and unknowing, because of her choice. The ash tree stood silent and broken, its spirit imprisoned once more. But in the heart of the lantern's fading glow, Alara thought she saw a spark of warmth, as if the flame itself was thanking her, acknowledging her courage. And though the night was heavy with shadows, dawn was already rising on the horizon. The roots remember. The first rays of dawn touched the horizon like trembling fingers pulling apart the veil of night. A pale light spread across the valley, chasing away the storm that had raged through the evening. In its silence, The villagers emerged cautiously from their cottages, eyes weary from fear and sleepless hours. They had heard the winds, had felt the earth shudder in the darkness, and many had whispered prayers that the old protections would hold. What they found instead was a scene they could neither fully rejoice in nor entirely mourn. At the base of the blackened ash tree lay Ilara, her body crumpled as though sleep had overtaken her after some impossible labor. Her hair was damp with dew, her hands streaked with dirt and ash, and beside her glowed the sacred lantern. Its flame was gentle now, no longer a raging fire to banish a demon, but a steadily golden light that breathed hope into the chilled morning air. The villagers gasped and rushed forward. Some wept openly, kneeling beside her. Others stared, torn between awe and suspicion, for they knew the girl had vanished into the storm the night before, and the trees' twisted bark whispered of things not easily told. Yet even in their uncertainty, relief washed over them. The river ran clean again, no trace of the salt that had cursed it. The granaries, though diminished, would be enough to carry them until the next harvest. And the fields, so long barren under a blight no one had named aloud, seemed to stir with a new promise of life. The curse had weakened, that much was certain, but the ash tree still stood. Its once proud trunk was scarred, fissured down its center as though lightning had torn through its heart. The bark curled outward like burned parchment, and its roots writhed in grotesque shapes, curling above the soil like the fingers of something trapped below. No birds perched on its branches now. No shade offered comfort. It was not dead, yet neither was it whole. The elders gathered around the tree, murmuring their ancient verses, but no words could ease the unease it inspired. Some wanted to cut it down, to burn it, until only ash remained. Others feared that such an act would release what still lingered beneath. For though Aroth's shriek had faded into the depths, its echo remained, vibrating faintly in the roots. Carried in the rustling of brittle leaves, Ilara, stirring from her collapse, heard it clearest of all. She opened her eyes, weary and hollow, and whispered, "He is not gone." The villagers froze. They had hoped never to hear such words again, not after a night so costly, but Il did not speak them to frighten. Her voice was soft, burdened with knowledge gained in the heart of the storm. She had seen Aroth's eyes as the lantern's flame consumed him, had felt his shadow claw at her soul in desperation. She knew the truth. He had been bound, not destroyed. Chains reforged, not broken. That day, the villagers carried her back to the square, laying her in the storyteller's house, the very woman whose life she had nearly taken under the spirit's command. The old woman, frail but strong in her kindness, tended to Ilara's wounds without judgment. She pressed warm broth into the girl's hands, spoke no condemnation, and when Ilara wept, the woman simply laid a hand upon her shoulder. It was the villagers themselves who wrestled with her story. At first, many could not reconcile the girl they knew with the one who had stolen the lantern and scattered the salt. Fear made their tongues sharp. Whispers followed her, even as she lay weak in her bed. But slowly, truth unraveled. She had been tempted, ensnared by the spirit's lies, and yet, when asked to spill blood, she had refused. She had turned, faced the darkness alone, and somehow emerged alive. Whatever mistakes she had made, she had also saved them all. And so, a new tale began to weave itself into the fabric of their village. The story of the girl who faced the spirit beneath the roots and survived. Children gathered to hear it, wide-eyed, as the storyteller spoke of her courage. The elders recited her name in the evening prayers, asking protection for her soul. Though suspicion never fully left some hearts, respect grew alongside it, until Elara became not a warning, but a symbol. Yet Elara herself never felt like a hero. When she walked among the fields, she felt the faint pull of the ash tree behind her, like a shadow stretching longer than it should. At night, when the lanterns' glow dimmed, she would hear whispers threading through the silence, promises of freedom, of greatness, of power unclaimed. Aroth's voice, though fainter than before, still found her, slithering into her dreams. The old woman counseled her gently. "Roots, remember what has been buried," she said one night, as the fire crackled in the hearth. "But memory is not destiny. You cannot erase the shadow, child, but you can choose to walk in the light." So the villagers changed their ways. No longer did they ignore the tree, letting it fester at the edge of their fields. They tended the ground around it, planting protective herbs, marking its boundary with stones carved with blessings. Each season, they renewed the lantern's flame and placed it at the base of the tree knot as an offering, but as a reminder, a barrier of vigilance, a promise of watchfulness. Children were taught never to stray too close, yet they also learned the story of why they must not. No longer a forgotten curse whispered only in shadows. Aroth's name became a caution etched into their traditions. They learned that evil often wears the mask of sorrow, that temptation can grow from promises wrapped in kindness, and Elara, though forever haunted by the echoes of her choice, found strength in knowing the truth. She was no longer the girl longing for escape from a dull life. She had seen what waited in the dark corners of desire, and she had chosen differently. She had carried the weight of her mistake, and in doing so, she had given her village a chance to endure. The ash tree still stands at the edge of the fields, scarred and crooked, its leaves whispering in winds that carry both memory and warning. Sometimes, when the dusk grows heavy, villagers say they see shapes flickering in its shadow's eyes, like dying embers peering out from between the roots. They shudder and hurry on, clutching charms or whispering prayers. But they also tell the story of the spirit bound beneath the roots, of the girl who faced him, and of the fragile line between protection and temptation, as delicate as ash drifting on the wind. For the roots remember. They remember the blood spilled to bind. They remember the lies whispered in the dark. They remember Elara's defiance, her courage, her choice, and they will remember still, long after those who walk the earth have turned to dust. But the question lingers when another curious soul presses their hand against the bark. Will the tree resist, or will it remember too well? And so, our story beneath the ash tree comes to an end. May its shadows and whispers linger only as gentle dreams, guiding you deeper into rest. Thank you for joining me tonight here at Whispers of the Night. Until we meet again, may your sleep be peaceful and your